Today, I'm behind the wheel of a 2022 Lexus GX460. This one is the black line trim, which is brand new for this year and adds a few cosmetic touches to the GX to make it look even better. However, the biggest upgrade to the GX for this year has to be the brand new infotainment system. Now, there's a large touchscreen and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto are both standard on the GX. So how good is this new system? How good is the GX overall? How does it drive? And does it compete with other luxury midsize SUVs out there? I'm going to answer all these questions, so let's get started. All right, I'm behind the wheel, so let me tell you more about this brand new GX and tell you more about how it drives. The first thing I want to talk about is the old school nature of this GX. Even though this is a 2022 model, and it definitely looks very nice. I love the stylish and boldness of the front end. And this brand new infotainment system that I'll talk about in a little bit, it does make this Lexus feel very modern. But there's an old school vibe about this GX, and I mean that in a good way. The old school vibe does make it very simple for anyone to come in and just start driving. And that sounds silly, but trust me, a lot of these modern SUVs, a lot of modern cars, you get in and there's so many buttons, so many stalks and knobs, it makes it very, very overwhelming, especially for people that aren't car people. I'll just start out with the shifter, right? Inside this GX, there's a standard shifter, right? Park is on top, drive is on bottom, neutral is in the middle, that's it. You don't have to relearn everything. With the new SUVs, a lot of them are just the big rotary knob, right? Some of them are buttons, and some of them are a mix, a hybrid with a shifter and buttons. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just put it into drive, and away you go. Now, there are other things that I'm familiar with that I still love in this GX. For example, the large window up front, the visibility is amazing. I really don't see any parts of the hood. It just slopes down, big windshield, big windows all around. Blind spot is amazing. Now, something else that's old school about this GX that I love are these mirrors. These side mirrors are enormous. They're huge, at least double the size of normal mirrors on modern SUVs, because most SUVs are so concentrated on, efficiency and fuel economy, they have to make the mirrors really small, and some are just really, really tiny. You can't really see out of them. These mirrors are absolutely huge. Something else that's like old school about this GX that I really love. But yeah, the mirrors, the visibility, also the seating position, the height are all good. When you get into the GX, you'll feel a little bit taller than a lot of the crossover SUVs out there. So it does give you a commanding view, which is very nice. Makes you, feel like you're sitting on top of everyone. Gives you a good all-around view while you're driving, and it just feels good overall. Also, the seats are comfortable. They don't have the most elegant or stylish design, and in fact, inside this black line, this is actually fake leather. This is actually synthetic leather, but the cushion itself is pretty good. Right now, I do feel like my back, is held in by the bolsters, not too aggressive. The bottom cushion is nice and soft, and also not hugging my thigh too much. So in terms of the seats, the comfort level is there, and not just the first row, second row too. I feel like it's very comfortable. You can sit for hours and still be okay. They just don't look like the most fanciest seats out there. Now, to complement these great seats, you do have heated and ventilated function for the front, and you have heated for the rear. So the front, again, kind of the old school vibe. To turn on the heating function or the ventilated function, there's like a scroll that you have to scroll, and it's kind of parked away up front. It's hard to see. If you're used to it, then it's pretty easy, but that's kind of old school too. Now it's, all buttons that you press, right? That one, you kind of scroll up and down. So it does work, but there's an old school vibe there. Also, the front driver's seat is 10-way powered, which is enough for most people. But again, if you compare it to some of the other luxury midsize SUVs, there are like 18-way or 20-way or 24-way. 10 feels inadequate, but it feels pretty comfortable to me. Now this one that I'm testing, this black line one, does only have 2 rows of seats. However, you can configure GX with 3 rows, which will give you captain chairs in the middle and then 2 smaller ones in the back. You know, it's great for little kids, and for emergencies, you could fit 1 more person versus the 5 setup here. But just know that the GX is not the biggest midsize, SUV, so it does get a little cramped. In fact, very cramped in the 3rd row. So just keep that in mind. However, for some, captain chairs are a necessity, and you can get them with the GX. Now, as for this 2022, the engine and transmission and the drivetrain, the 4-wheel drive setup, nothing changed. And for me, I actually like it. I know it's not the best with fuel economy, I know that, but there's something about this 4.6 liter V8 that's just right. The torque, the power is just right in all conditions. It's not the fastest SUV, but when you're around town, you never feel like this is slow. It just gets going, it gets up to speed, it can pass. You could tow plenty too with this GX, right? So I like this 4.6. And plus, a lot of you guys know, this engine is bulletproof, literally bulletproof. You can go 200, 300, 400, 500,000 miles on this engine with very, very little maintenance. I mean, this is the reason why Lexus in general and Toyota in general, they have an extremely high resale value because the powertrain is bulletproof. Now, this 4.6 liter is generating about 300 horsepower, about 330 pound-feet of torque, which again is adequate for this class. It's not the fastest, and it's made it to a 6-speed transmission. Yes, it's a 6-speed. It's not an 8-speed or 9 or 10. But around town, it's always in the right gear. Now, this GX also comes with full-time 4-wheel drive, and it has a high mode and low mode. So if you're just driving around town, it's always going to be in high mode. But if you wanted to take this GX off-road, you can go into the low mode. Just remember, there's a knob, and when you turn the knob, you have to push down, and the car has to be in neutral. Otherwise, it just keeps blinking and chiming, right? You have to be in neutral, just remember that. There's also a downhill assist control too. There's another knob here on the left side. So in case you're tackling some steep hill or rocks or whatever it may be, right? You wanted it to kind of do it by itself. It's like cruise control for a hill. It's there too. Now, because of those 2 knobs and the 2 knobs underneath, which is for volume and tune, there are a lot of knobs, and at first you may get confused which one is actually just volume, right? But once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Now, as for the looks, the GX basically has not changed for decades, other than a slight refresh back a few years ago in 2019. But the overall shape, it's a little awkward at certain angles, but it's still the same. It's very high, and it has a pier shape, so it has a wide shoulders, and it's kind of bubbly in some places, right? However, with this black line trim, things are blackened out on the outside. So the front spindle grille has this shadow chrome color, right? It does look really good. And plus those tri-beam headlights still look amazing with the Nike Swoop daytime running lights. I love that. And on the side, you'll see that the trim around the windows are all blackened out, right? There's no chrome anywhere. The wheels, the 18-inch wheels, are also special, the shadow black color. So basically it makes the GX look a little bit more menacing, a little bit more stylish, and I do like it. Although, other than the front, from all sides, it still looks like a GX from years ago. You really can't tell. Now, this one happens to have roof rack on top and crossbars, which actually does make this GX look a little bit more outdoorsy, like you're ready to tackle the outdoors. Although, I would say most people getting this GX would never take this outdoors, probably just use that as a daily driver. Now, on the inside, the black line does add this wood trim everywhere, so you don't have that normal wood look that many people are not fond of. The headline is also like this suede, black material. Inside, I think it still looks pretty good, especially with this brand new infotainment system that I didn't talk about yet. But many of you guys know one of my biggest complaints of the GX, and one of the biggest complaints overall from all reviewers and drivers, is the infotainment system that was from like 20 years ago, okay? The interface was just ancient. It didn't look good. It was slow. You couldn't do anything with it other than to turn on, the climate control and listen to the radio. That was it. Finally, Lexus decided to upgrade the system. It's a 10.3-inch touchscreen, and as you can see, it's pretty responsive. The interface is definitely a whole lot better. This works the same way as the ones you find in the other Lexus within the lineup. But yeah, it's a dual screen setup, so you can have 60% on one side and 30% on the other side, or 60-40 I should say. And it just works a whole lot better. And finally, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay is standard. Now, the touchpad is still here. Lexus didn't get rid of it completely, so you could still use that. And a couple of buttons, like the menu button, is still there, and that's missing from the screen. So I was looking for how to go back to the menu, and there's no way to do it unless you hit that menu button that's right above the touchpad. So you still have to kind of use both. But with this touchscreen, with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, the modernized navigation system, the new interface, this GX feels so much more modern. Feels like, yes, it's a 2022 car versus a 2000 car. Now, I've been driving around town for a little bit. This GX is still very quiet. It's well insulated like all other Lexuses. It's not as quiet as, say, like a X5 or a GLE, but it is still very quiet. And, combined with everything else, right? Like this good ride height, seating position, the seats, the powertrain, the visibility. This is still a very, very nice SUV. People that are buying this as a daily driver will not be disappointed. It's a really nice driving SUV. And I didn't mention the throttle or the brake pedal feel. Both are really good. The brake pedal feels normal, it has that linear feel. It's not mushy, it doesn't come on strong. Some of the modern SUVs have that really touchy brake feel. It's either like on or off, and it's really hard to get that smoothness. Not a problem with this GX. And same thing with the throttle. It's just right. The combination of those things are also really good. Now, some of the other features you get inside this Lexus, well, you do get heated steering wheel. The steering wheel overall feels pretty good. This was also upgraded back in 2019, so it's a little bit smaller, but I like the leather feel. It feels good in my hands, it's heated, and the buttons is minimal. Unfortunately though, there's like 3 stalks to control everything else, like your wipers, your cruise control. I mean, it gets a little confusing, but the buttons on the steering wheel is minimized. And because it's heated, yes, it does feel really good when it's really cold out. But unfortunately, the heating element is only in the sides, not all the way through the steering wheel. So sometimes, it does feel fine until you make a turn, and then it feels cold again, and then it feels fine. Unfortunately, that has not been updated. Now, as for the gauge cluster, it looks pretty good. Pretty modern with a small screen in the middle. You see all the usual stuff, your trip computer, cruise control, gives you some information about the 4-wheel drive setup, and also vehicle settings and safety features. Now, as for safety features, you pretty much get the essentials. You get blind spot monitoring, parking sensors, you get adaptive cruise control, lane departure alert, and also pre-collision alert. So it does give you the essentials, but it doesn't have all the latest goodies, but just enough. And by the way, in terms of blind spot monitoring, right, you do see that on the mirrors. The mirrors are also heated and standard now. They are power folding. Before, they were optional. Now, power folding is standard. I haven't talked about the space yet. The GX is somewhere in the middle. There are some behemoth mid-size SUVs out there, okay? The large 3-row SUVs that really should be considered full-size SUVs, yet they're still mid-size SUVs. The GX, on the other hand, is like a mid-size SUV, as strange as that may sound. So it's not the widest, it's not the longest, but it's just right, in my opinion. So up front, I have plenty of headroom, shoulder room, hip room is okay, although a little bit smaller than some of the other SUVs, but overall, very comfortable. And same thing in the second row. As you can see, I have about 3 to 4 inches of legroom. I'm about 5'10", so that's plenty behind my driving position, and also headroom plenty, like probably like 6 inches, right? So second row, also very comfortable. And if you don't have the third row, and you can see in the back, there's a good amount of room. There's a good amount of room. So in terms of size, it's like a mid-size SUV. It's not a large mid-size SUV. Now, one thing that you may not like with the GX is the rear hatch. So you could open the window if you wanted to separately. It's not powered. You have to press a button and then you can just throw things inside. Or you could pull it and it opens to the side. It's kind of a trademark to the GX, which is great in some situations. For example, loading in, really easy, really easy. However, if you want a power function, it's not there. If it's raining, it sucks that you don't have the tailgate on top to cover the rain, right? So there are some drawbacks to it, and that hasn't changed for 2022. As for pricing, the base trim to a GX starts around $56,000, and the top trim level is about $66,000, so about $10,000 difference. And this black line is right in the middle, about $60,000. But of course, there's a lot of goodies and packages that you can add on that definitely bumps up the price significantly. However, if you compare this to its German counterparts, again, like the GLE or the X5 or the Q7, those could command a much higher price tag because of the different engine configurations and different options and equipment. So this is in line, but I would say it's actually a little bit cheaper. And because this is a Lexus and it's bulletproof reliability, people continue to buy the GX by the boatload because they never really have to worry about it breaking. That's the big thing. So what are my final thoughts about this GX? Well, it definitely has that old school vibe, and I do think a lot of that is good with this GX. I've driven a lot of GXs over the years, and I do think it's one of my favorites. It's not the top, but it is one of my favorites because I do feel like it's a really nice SUV. It's the right size, it's great to drive, it feels comfortable, plenty of power, you could tow with it, and you never have to worry about it breaking. That's the thing. You don't have to worry about bringing this to the shop after 6 months of ownership or a year ownership, which you hear about with other luxury brands, right? That's the biggest draw to the GX. And for me, I like the look, especially with this new front end, with this black line where everything has that black shadow look with the really nice tri-beam headlights and the spindle grille. I like it. I like it. So in my opinion, I do like the GX. I think this is a fantastic luxury midsize SUV. And if you're in the market, you should definitely test drive one. All right, guys, smash up the like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more review videos. Take care. Bye-bye.